Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about how Uttarakhand might soon experience a constitutional crisis. We also take a quick look at the meeting that took place between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the leaders of Jammu and Kashmir. But first, we talk about the Delta Plus variant. Earlier this week, on Tuesday, the Union Health Ministry categorized the Delta Plus variant as a variant of concern. Now, the Delta Plus variant, of course, has mutated from the Delta variant, which was a major contributor to the second wave of COVID-19 in India. In this segment, Conan Sharif, who reports on health for the Indian Express, joins us to talk about this variant. So, Conan, the Delta Plus variant has been recognized as a variant of concern by the Union Health Ministry. Before we talk about the variant itself, could you first explain what exactly counts as a variant of concern?
Yeah, so when the pandemic started evolving, when it started from Wuhan, this virus is basically an RNA virus. So what RNA virus does is whenever it enters a host, it replicates. So whenever it replicates, it makes mistakes. These mistakes is what we call as mutations. So if you have to imagine an RNA virus, it's like one brick built over another brick. So the number of bricks. So these bricks are basically amino acids. So there's a change in structure of the amino acids. So it's basically the position. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So whenever there is some change in the position of this protein, we call them as mutations. Most of the times, they're all very insignificant ones. But sometimes they become very significant ones, especially in the spike protein region. Why spike protein region? Because this is the region that actually sort of initiates the virus to attach to our lungs. So most of the mutations which have when the virus started from Wuhan and then has evolved in different parts of the globe are in the spike protein region. In the recent times, we have 2-3 variants that have become a cause of concern. One is the variant which was in the UK last December, which is the UK variant, and then we saw variants in South Africa, Brazil, and more recently during the second wave in India. So most of these, the common thing about these variants is the fact that they become more transmissible, which means when they spread, they infect more number of people.
Okay, so when you talk about these variants, I suppose the Delta variant would be one such example of that, right?
Yeah. The Delta variant is, which we call it as the B.1.617.2, which now the WHO calls it a Delta variant. So this variant became globally recognized variant of concern. Most of the countries have termed it as variant of concern. In fact, now it has become the most dominant variant in the UK from the Alpha variant, which caused the previous surge. And in India, this variant is the reason behind India's surge. Now, what is a variant of concern? Basically, there are three factors which define a variant of concern. First, if the variant causes increase in transmissibility, which means it infects more number of people. Second, if it becomes more virulent, which means that it manifests more severe form of disease, that if there is an increase in hospitalization or people who are elderly or vulnerable, you see more of them getting admitted in the ICU, that sort of a change. Third is the fact that the therapeutics and vaccines, whether they're still effective. So many of these variants have shown reduction in vaccine effectiveness. In fact, the Delta variant, which you mentioned now, UK data has shown that you need both the doses have to be administered to fight against this variant, in the sense that if you need complete protection from severe form of disease, then both the doses is required when you compare it to the Alpha variant. So these three factors, basically the transmission, how virulent and how effective they're against therapeutics as well as vaccines, defines whether variant is a variant of concern or not. So, and recently what has happened, which on Tuesday, the health ministry categorized a new variant, which we call as the Delta Plus variant.
So we know that it's the Delta variant that has essentially mutated and become Delta Plus. So what do we know about the difference between the two?
So like I mentioned, Delta Plus variant was B.1.617.2, which was behind India's ferocious second wave. So Delta Plus is B.1.617.2 plus another change in the amino acid, which is the K417N. So it's very simple. So at the 417th position, there is a change in the amino acid. So K is being replaced by N. So what has happened is this K417N is a mutation in the spike protein region. So that is why it becomes very, very significant, because spike protein is the region where actually allows the virus to enter our lungs and attaches to our lungs, and then therefore then starts replicating, and then you have the infection spreading. So delta plus variant is the delta, and this K417N lineage, it's a sublineage. However, this K417 has been found in other variants too. In fact, it has been found in the beta variant, and the beta variant in fact showed us that it had significant properties of immune evasion. So whatever antibodies that you had developed, it was escaping that immune escape. Also, that variant with K417 also had resistance to the monoclonal antibody cocktail, which is a treatment that is now being used in several parts of the country, in some private hospitals in India and across the globe.
Right. It is the treatment where essentially artificial antibodies are used to fight COVID-19.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So you manufacture artificial antibodies and then administer them. So the K417N has been found earlier in the beta variant. Now this variant has been found with the B1617.2, which is the delta variant, and it's together now it's called as a delta plus variant. Another thing that you also need to remember is that along with delta variants, there have been some additional mutations, but this is a significant one. This is the most well-known one. So it's not like there have not been other mutations with the delta. There have been mutations with delta, but this mutation is the most well known because you already know some things about K417N. So that's why now this delta sublineage has been treated as a VOC by the INSACOG, and which now has been approved by the Health Ministry.
Okay, so one imagines the things that the Delta variant has: more transmissibility, vaccines not being as effective against it. We imagine that obviously being true for the Delta Plus as well. But do we understand whether it's more transmissible and whether vaccines are even less effective against it?
So all the three things: first is immune escape, second disease severity, and third is increase in transmissibility. All three are still being examined by the chain of laboratories. We still have very little data. In fact, Public Health England, who has also come out with this some details of its 205 sequences of this lineage, has not given too much details on this because they're also studying how it is. But what we know is the fact that since the K417N was found in the beta variant, and since beta variant was reporting immune evasion properties, so we have some idea that this could be of some significance. But it's too early right now to come to a conclusion that there could be immune escape and disease severity. In fact, when we have these samples, we have to actually link them to the epidemiological as well as clinical data and find out at the hospital level if actually is there any change, whether patients who are detected with this variant are showing severe form of disease. So that it's too early right now, but as an abundant precaution, the government has said that the three states where it has been detected, in fact, four states as of now, including Karnataka, you have to increase your surveillance, contact trace all the people who have some history of this variant, and of course, then look at the local epidemiological data, which means that if the surge in that localized area is because of this variant, as well as look at the hospital level data, whether it is increasing your hospitalization rates. And finally, since we have vaccinations, so increase the vaccinations so that we are able to bring this under control.
Right, and we know that vaccinations do slow the spread of these variants and reduce the odds of new ones coming up. So, talking about vaccinations, the new phase of India's vaccination drive kicked off earlier this month. To what extent has that increased the rate at which doses are being administered?
Yeah, so there's been a significant shift in terms of the coverage in the first 3-4 days of the new phase of vaccination. So just to go back, on June 21st, 75% of the vaccines that the three vaccine manufacturers are manufacturing is now procured by the central government to vaccinate everyone 18 and above. Prior to that, states had to only procure vaccines for 18 to 44. Due to this whole thing, the supply has become stabilized, due to which the number of vaccine doses that are available has increased. Also, you remember that the two vaccine manufacturers, Bharat Biotech and Serum Institute, had started augmenting the capacities. That is being seen right now. So, a multiple factors has now resulted in increasing vaccinations. So, if you remember on the first day, on Monday, when the new revised guidelines were implemented. We saw a record 80 lakh vaccinations in the country. And then in the next 2 days, again, we reported 60 lakh vaccinations. And today also, we will see that number being met. So we are seeing an increase in vaccination. In fact, our sources tell us that there'll be over 13.5 to 14 crore doses available in the next month. So you will have a baseline of 45 to 50 lakh vaccinations happening every day. So it all depends on how states plan, because the central government has already given them 30 days advance the dose planning, in the sense they know exactly how many doses the states will be receiving, and they can plan in advance. So the supplies have stabilized. Now it's for the states to increase their coverage by doing more on-site registrations and vaccinations. And the other data that has emerged from Monday is the fact that more than 65 to 75% of vaccinations are happening in the rural India.
Yeah, and this was big news because earlier the main concern was that largely people in rural India weren't being able to get doses, especially because it required a lot of people to register online, right?
Yeah. So that changed. The revised guidelines now say that every center has the option to do on-site registrations. Most of the vaccinations that have happened, which is more than 55%, have happened due to the on-site registrations, which are the walk-ins. So that's why we are seeing significant increase in rural coverage. So this will be very, very important, because the fact that these mutations can happen in any part of the country. So you need to have a critical mass being covered in every part of the country. So if you have a significant susceptible population in rural India, and if the mutations happen there, then again it can spread. So it could be a big public health problem. So it's a good trend which we are seeing, that rural India is now getting significant of vaccination coverage. Still early days, it's just 4 to 5 days, and it'll be really crucial for the states to keep up this same coverage in the rural India, because remember, 70 to 30% or little more than that is the sort of urban rural divide we have in India. And in the first 2 3 phases, we saw most of the vaccination happening in urban centers because of the technological barriers that was there, that you had to actually go on Coven and register yourself and then get vaccinated.
And next we talk about Uttarakhand. Back in March, the Chief Minister of Uttarakhand, Trivendra Singh Rawat, had resigned from his post. And a day after that happened, his long-time co-worker at the RSS, Tirath Singh Rawat, took oath as the Chief Minister of the state. This was a surprise to many, since Tirath Singh Rawat was not one of the probables that the BJP had been considering. Now, the thing to note is that Tirath Singh Rawat is not a member of the state legislature in Uttarakhand, which is needed for the post of the Chief Minister. Tirath Singh Rawat is in fact a member of parliament, an MP from the constituency of Garhwal. But if he hopes to hold the post of the Chief Minister, he needs to be elected as an MLA. But that hasn't happened for him yet, and it's already been around 3.5 months since he first took oath. So how long can he continue to be in this position? And what happens if elections are unable to take place in the state and he is unable to become an MLA? To answer these questions and more, Apurva Vishwanath, who reports on law for the paper, joins us. So Apurva, what exactly does the law say about who can hold the office of the Chief Minister in this case?
So Article 164, Clause 4 of the Constitution applies to any minister, not just Chief Minister. And it says that if he or she is not a member of this legislature of the state for 6 consecutive months, then he or she cannot be a minister. So it is a 6-month time frame that they get to get themselves elected and be a member of the legislature.
And right now it appears that while holding the position of the Chief Minister, Tirath Singh Rawat is still a member of the Lok Sabha. Is that allowed by the law, or is there a 6-month buffer period for that as well?
So the qualification to be a minister is that you have to be a member of the state legislature. So which means you have to either be an MLA or a MLC. But you get that 6-month window for you to get yourself elected. So the date the 6-month period ends, when you've not been a member of the state legislature for 6 months, then you cease to become a minister.
So let's say after 6 months pass and Tirath Singh Rawat is not elected. He stops being the Chief Minister, but can he still continue to be a member of the parliament?
So he has not yet resigned from his status as a parliamentarian. So to contest the bypoll, however, he will have to resign and get himself elected as an MLA. But if there is no election and Rawat ceases to be the chief minister, he can continue holding his post as an MP.
So in this case, what options does the BJP have?
So I think because of the pandemic, there are only two options: either to not hold the elections, in which case the election commission has to have the central government certify that it is impossible to hold the elections. The other option is, of course, to hold the election. If the election is not held, in that event, Tirth Singh Rawat cannot continue to be the chief minister. If the BJP has to keep him as the chief minister and not get someone new, then the only option before the party is to have an election.
And could you give examples of situations like this from the past? Have we seen a lot of them?
Just during this pandemic, we've had a similar situation in Maharashtra, where Uddhav Thackeray was not the member of the state legislature. He became the chief minister, and then he had the same 6-month window to get himself elected to the state legislature. Initially, the EC said it is difficult to hold elections during the pandemic. So Uddhav sought the governor's permission to have himself nominated to the upper house of the state, which is basically in the legislative council. There are about 12 seats which are usually nominated by the governor, and these are for experts in various fields, be it in the arts, science, or these things. So the governor nominates these members. So Uddhav sought the governor's permission to have himself nominated first because an election could not be held. Governor Koshyari had refused, saying that the nomination would not be possible. Then subsequently, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had to intervene and the elections were ultimately held for the upper house. So Uddhav Thackeray is now an MLC in Maharashtra who is also the chief minister.
So in situations where polls cannot take place, say right now during the pandemic, is there anything the law says about scenarios like these?
So there is a provision in the Representation of People's Act which says that if the term remaining for the bypoll is only 1 year, that is to say, if let's say an MLA has resigned or for whatever reason the seat has been vacated in its 4th year and there's only 1 year left for the term to complete. In that case, the election commission can decide. It has the power to decide not to hold the bypoll in the last year. So this is something that the election commission can use in the case of Uttarakhand as well, because the assembly elections took place in 2017 and it's less than a year to go for the next assembly elections. So the election commission can cite this and not have an election. At the same time, if an election is not held, there are two implications. One, that Rawat cannot continue to be the chief minister. The party will have to bring in someone new. And second, this could set a precedent for other states. For example, the situation is same even in West Bengal. Mamata Banerjee has in fact lost her election from Nandigram. So she is not an MLA, although she is the chief minister. Although she is contesting the election result in Nandigram, she will also have the 6-month period to get herself re-elected.
And in the end, we talk about the Prime Minister meeting the leaders from J&K. Yesterday, that is on Thursday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi met the leaders of the PAGD, or the People's Alliance for Gupkar Declaration, which is a coalition of mainstream parties in Jammu and Kashmir. This was the first such outreach by the centre to the leaders of the region since Jammu and Kashmir's special status was scrapped on August 5, 2019, and it was bifurcated into 2 union territories. After the move, many political leaders, including many members of the PAGD, were detained or put under house arrest for months. The meeting between the leaders and the PM took place in New Delhi. One of the main agenda for the meeting was delimitation, which is the process of redrawing constituencies in the union territory. The talks went on for 3 hours, and during it, PM Modi said that delimitation has to happen at a quick pace so that elections can happen and J&K can get an elected government that gives strength to J&K's development trajectory. During the meeting, the leaders raised the demand for the restoration of J&K's statehood. In response to this, the Prime Minister reportedly told them that the delimitation process should conclude first and then other issues will be addressed. After the meeting, Home Minister Amit Shah made a statement along the same line, saying that the delimitation exercise and peaceful elections are important milestones in restoring statehood as promised in Parliament. Talking to reporters after the meeting, Congress leader Ghulam Nabi Azad said that 5 demands were put forth during the talks with the PM. Granting of statehood, conducting assembly elections to restore democracy, rehabilitation of Kashmiri Pandits in J&K, release of all political detainees, and that on domicile rules. Speaking to news agency PTI immediately after the meeting, Farooq Abdullah said that his party, the National Conference, would continue to challenge through legal and constitutional means the abrogation of the special status of Jammu and Kashmir under Article 370 of the Constitution. He added that there is a loss of trust which needs to be restored immediately, and for that, to begin with, the centre should work for restoration of complete statehood to J&K. Besides this, People's Conference leader Muzaffar Hussain Beg termed the meeting cordial and positive. You were listening to 3 Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.